This is Louise. I'm going to tell the story about Louise and her experience at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. Hospital opened 5th of September this year, and I met Louise about a month after the opening when I went to the hospital and had a look around it. Louise was pretty well prepared. She had brought her appointment letter. With the appointment letter was some information about how to get to the hospital. She came by public transport. She'd even gone on the website and looked up what to do, what to bring, etc. She'd even downloaded a floor plan of the hospital, so well prepared indeed. And still, she was lost. And she was not very happy with that. So let's see if we can get some clarity around why that is. But first I want to talk a little bit about wayfinding. So what is wayfinding actually? Why should we care about wayfinding other than room numbers? Which is yeah. Now that's being recorded. Well, there are two reasons why, actually there are a lot of reasons, but two really important reasons why wayfinding is important. And we, of course, are slightly biased. This is the work that we do. Number one is customer experience. And number two, something that will interest many people too, is the money that is involved with wayfinding. So let's talk about the customer experience first. There's growing insight that improved customer experience, better customer experience, people feeling better in a space actually creates better health outcomes. And associated benefits are that it will create less complaints, and quite an important one, and I think it was quite clear from the previous speaker also, is that when people feel better, they're not as aggressive to staff as they may be if they don't feel that good. And then number two is the money component. Well, creating a good wayfinding system costs money, but not having a good wayfinding system actually costs, there's jargon for this, a shitload more money. Actually, a few years ago now, we did a survey at the Austin Hospital here in Melbourne. 480-bed hospital, and part of the survey was that the staff told us how much time they spend on a daily basis giving directions. Any guesses in terms of money? $2.2 million in staff time on an annual basis. So that makes wayfinding, in this case, quite an important thing. So wayfinding system is all the information that is required to navigate effectively. And I hear you say, not signage. No, it's not just signage, it is all the information that you require. And we work within 4 realms when we develop our thinking, our strategy around wayfinding: architecture, process, communication, and design. And I'll just run you through a couple just a couple of highlights from the 4 realms. So thinking about architecture, really important for the wayfinding user is that the environment is understood. We call that a legible environment. There's something called educated seeking and landmarks, and I'll talk about it in a second. So legibility in an environment means no signage is required quite often. So if I ask you to go to level 3, what would you do here? This is a question, yes. You would go to the list. How do you know that it is? You don't even have to think about it, right? These are the lifts, so therefore that's legibility. This is a good way to show that there's an entrance somewhere, and it sounds really simple, but quite often it doesn't happen like this. You have to look for an entrance. And this says this is where I go if I want to speak to a staff member, for instance, or if I want to have some information. And educated seeking, this is an example, or this is a supermarket in the town where my mum lives, in the Netherlands. And almost all of you, if I asked you to go and get a bottle of milk, you would walk into the supermarket and you would automatically walk to the back of the supermarket, wouldn't you? Because that's what you do in your own supermarket. And supermarket designers will design supermarkets so that you don't have to think too much. Less thinking is more buying. And the third highlight from the architectural section is dealing with landmarks. Well, hospitals are quite often kind of anonymous corridors and anonymous spaces. A lot of architects do talk about the importance of having natural light, but then all the courtyards, for instance, look the same. So there's still very little understanding of where you are or where you've been. So creating landmarks in a hospital is a really important thing. And when you think about landmarks, you need to make sure that they are different enough from each other so that you don't have 16 koalas on every corner because you still don't know where you've been there. Or a bear. Okay, process. The most overlooked component in a wayfinding project. Process for us is about mapping out the physical journey that a user has to take, and then identifying and analyzing every interaction between that user, the environment, the organization, or people. We do that using kind of a service design methodology, lots of post-it notes, lots of brown paper on the wall. But a really important thing, because this is for a hospital that we recently did in Belgium. The journey from the main entrance to the admissions counter sounded really simple, because when you stand at the main entrance you can see the entrance to the admission counter. But we identified 58 steps that somebody has to take, has to think, has to decide, has to make a choice for, to actually sit in front of the person at admissions. If we don't identify all of this, we'll miss parts of where do we give them what type of information. All right, the third point, communication. I'll show you a few highlights. Terminology, really important. We like to keep things simple. You can hear it in the way that I speak. I like to keep things simple. It's much better for people who have difficulties with the language, or have difficulties reading, or have cognitive difficulties. And although the doctor that studied ophthalmology for 10 years probably really wants to call it ophthalmology, but eye clinic is actually much easier for people to use. The pre-visit information is really important, and it's one of the things that will come back in the presentation a bit later too. Make sure that we prepare the user for their visit. And again, very much underrated part of communication is how do you train your staff and volunteers about how to communicate with their clients. Almost never happens. And then the fourth point is design. This is the thing that people think that we do only, but it's only one of the four realms in which we normally work. And I'll show you a couple of, again, highlights. Important to think about legibility, so type size, for instance. This is a university in Townsville with lettering about that size for the cars. Doesn't really work. This is a hospital in Abu Dhabi with very low contrast information. And this is one of my favorites. So I said to the facility manager that I walked across the camping. That would be nice. the campus, I said, do people have difficulties with reading this sign? He said, no, it's really easy. This is there and that is there. I said, have you been here for a little while? He said, 22 years. Yeah. All right, so going back to Louise. She's still lost and she's still not very happy. This, by the way, is not Louise. This is a standard photo that I got, that I needed a kind of frustrated lady. Sorry? Yeah. All right, going back to the 4 rounds. Royal Adelaide Hospital. Again, there might be a slight bias in here. We think that 2 parts of the 4 have been done fairly well. I'll do this in 5 minutes. The architecture and the design components, we think, have been done fairly well. Although it's a very large hospital, the legibility, the identification of entrances, the identification of, for instance, clinic receptions, all works pretty well. It's pretty straightforward, the corridors and the open spaces. So architecturally, we think works very well. There is a component here with signage, one of the ways to provide information. Very extensive design process, but lots of digital information, wayfinding kiosks. At every entrance there is kind of digital information that will change the information depending on the time of day. So, at 5 o'clock when the clinics have closed, there's no need to have that information on your signage anymore, so it may as well disappear. And then consistency information, so we've got a certain terminology around destinations. We use a coding here like you would do at an airport or at a railway station. So that makes that the 2 parts that are quite often underrated, the communication and the process component, is probably failing here. So let's go back to Louise. She had an appointment letter and it has a whole lot of information in the appointment letter. But when you look at the information that is provided, can I point to this? There we go. So everything that you see in the square is wrong. It's factually wrong. So the Royal Adelaide Hospital doesn't have outpatients. They don't call it outpatient. Nowhere in the hospital is there any reference to outpatients. It's called clinics. And we have a very particular reason to call it clinics instead of outpatients. There is no level 3. There is a level 3. And there is a destination 3, which are clinics. There is no area 1. So when I said to Louise, I said, what, huh? And she said, yeah, I've been standing here for the last 15 minutes and I've asked a volunteer. And the volunteer just said, you walk down 2 corridors and then you turn right and then you turn left and you'll see some reception there. She said, I did that, but I couldn't really find it. When you look at the redesign of all of that information, it's easy to make it much clearer. So this is a part of communication where there was no way that she would ever find her destination. What is really important also is that in between our thinking around the Wayfinding System and the opening of the hospital, they introduced queuing and checking kiosks. Somebody, probably an IT person, has decided where they go. Let me just go back to so you remember this photo? This is actually you standing at the main entrance, and this is what you see, and we want you to see this. It's the first bit of information that we want you to see when you enter the hospital, with wayfinding kiosks here. And these kiosks are actually behind you when you're walking. They're the most important interaction that we want people to have once they walk into the hospital, completely hidden. Almost all of those are completely hidden in the hospital. There's also, in the letter, there was no information about what you were supposed to do. So it didn't say, go to blue kiosky thing and scan something. So it didn't happen. What comes out of that kiosk is an appointment at Radonic, which I think means radio oncology clinic. They probably ran out of ink. They didn't know that you could write that whole word on it. You remember the Wayfinder? Wayfinder is all the information, and information about the interaction between the person, the user, the people, and the building and the organization. So it's a really great opportunity to provide a complete set of instructions that comes out of a kiosk like that. And then they're set. They know, the kiosk knows where it is, and therefore it can tell you how to get to your next destination. I mean, you look at the original process that we developed the Wayfinding System for, and the new process. There's a big gap because of this new check-in system. And unfortunately, it means that there's no way that with what the present situation is and what the user, what Louise has and has been provided with and gets provided with during her travels through the hospital, there's no way that she will get to where she needs to be. All right, how do we change it? We think there needs to be much more collaboration between the hospital, the wayfinding consultant, and the architect. Those blue kiosks should never have been dealt with by the IT department. Just the fact that you have to plug it in and it has a data connection doesn't make it an IT thing. Right? We don't let the IT guys deal with the MRI equipment. Right? We think about it very carefully. So that needs to change. The hospital needs to understand that every time that they change the process, that it needs to be re-looked at. The user interaction, and with that the user experience needs to be looked at. Wayfinding and signage, it's not the same thing. It's just one of the tools, because wayfinding is all the information that we require. And that process, the connection with process is actually the most important thing. I was debating with my colleague yesterday, if we ever had to choose between, on a brownfield site, to work on the communication around wayfinding or the signage on the site, we think we'll have a higher impact working with the communication around wayfinding instead of doing new signage. And I'd like to end with my favorite photo, where everything that I've discussed today shows up wrong. Process, design, thinking, architecture. That's it. Thank you.